Hello, everybody. Just start off that if you guys were at home right now and watching a movie on Netflix, and I'm here to introduce the panel, so you'd probably be going skip intro. Let's get straight to the show, but unfortunately, that's not how it's going to work today. I'd like to begin by thanking Garda World for sponsoring this panel and the forum for convening it. Garda World has built an international reputation for helping organizations navigate complex risks. These are exactly the kind of environments where artificial intelligence is already being deployed. Places where speed, accuracy are valuable, but where trust, human judgment, and resilience remain indispensable. Their presence today is a reminder that AI adoption is never only about technology. It is about applying new tools in real-world contexts, where oversight and accountability are essential. The question posed by this panel are important. Around the world, organizations are piloting AI applications, but finding it difficult to scale them. The barriers often lie less in the algorithms themselves and more on governance, infrastructure, and the leadership that is required to integrate them effectively. If AI is to generate the productivity gains that economists predict, these organizational challenges must be addressed with the same urgency as the technical ones. Canada has developed a distinctive ecosystem that is national in scope and collaborative by design. From Vector here in Toronto to MILA in Montreal to emerging clusters in Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver, we see a network that connects discovery and practice. For us at McGill University, it's part of our ecosystem. It is we are deeply engaged in projects that span healthcare, national security, sustainability, and education, often in collaboration with partners in industry and government. What distinguishes this Canadian model is the emphasis on industry partnerships. Universities and research universities like McGill can advance methods and algorithms, but it is through collaboration with business that these ideas are tested, refined, scaled, and eventually commercialized. Recent partnerships have demonstrated that some of the greatest productivity gains come not from the most eye-catching applications, but from improvements in logistics, predictive maintenance, and back-office processes that strengthen competitive across the entire sectors. These efforts are tied to broader networks like MILA that I've mentioned earlier, which has become one of the world's largest machine learning research centers and is a focal point for collaboration between researchers and companies. The lesson is clear. The productivity curve in AI will not rise simply because technology advances. It will depend on leadership choices, on governance frameworks, on building that public trust and collaboration that bridges research and practice. Canada's ecosystem, with institutions working alongside each other and many others, show that collaboration can be structured. This is why today's discussion is so valuable. So thank you for the opportunity to make these opening remarks. And on that, I'll turn it over to Charting the AI Productivity Curve, What's Real and What's Next panel. Thank you.
The stock was already higher.
Reaction to the stock of $29 billion of market cap improvement.
Are you investing because you actually have a strong conviction around what that ROIC will be? Or is this a way with you?
In a world flooded with data and competing signals, clarity is power. Out of the noise emerges AiiA President's Brief. Driven by Crisis 24's global intelligence, empowered by Palantir's advanced AI. Leaders gain foresight to identify risks, seize opportunities, and forge decisive outcomes, bringing state-level intelligence to titans of global business. empowering leaders who shape the future.
Welcome, everybody. My name is Geoffrey Hills, and I am the Managing Director of Crisis 24 AiiA. It's an honor to be here both in Toronto and at the IEFA conference. We just saw a video played. The product AiiA is something we had the privilege of launching just last week. It represents an exciting partnership between GardaWorld and Palantir. AiiA is a platform where AI now allows us to replicate and model the most elite levels of intelligence, once reserved for heads of state. AiiA's presidential brief aims to deliver with speed, accuracy, relevance, and make the type of anticipatory intelligence and foresight available to the most senior ranks of private sector business. As we discuss the impacts of AI on productivity, I thought AiiA represents a timely and unique example of that. I will be moderating today's panel, and I'll ask my esteemed colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with Farlei.
Hello, my name is Farlei. I'm representing here Stefanini group. I'm a Brazilian. I'm living here in US, and we are a tech consulting company. We provide services for companies that are looking for software and everything else.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me today. My name is Aaron Harris. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Sage. Sage is a global leader in accounting, finance, people, payroll, software, in the cloud. Really excited to be part of this conversation today.
And hello, I'm Ansel Stein. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Crisis 24 AiiA, and had the pleasure of leading the team that built the prototype, and excited to talk about it today and hear from you all.
Bonjour à tous. Nice to see you all. Marjorie, Janiewicz, Global Head of Revenue at Mistral AI. We build large language models and AI systems for the enterprise.
Great, thank you, everybody. So, as we start, across all of your respective sectors, which AI use cases are delivering real, measurable, and productivity gains today? And which ones are providing potential for being overhyped? Marjorie, let's start with you. Mistral represents a new generation of open-weight, European-born AI models. From your perspective, what's driving the next wave of enterprise adoption, model performance, openness, or customization?
Yeah, so from our side, we see quite a bit of use cases that are starting to drive really great value for the enterprise and public sectors alike. We see use cases that are very much ingrained in the concept of workflow automation, where it's very important to connect those AI systems with the DNA of your enterprise, your systems, your complex tools, and adapt that really to those AI systems. So I think I heard in the prior video, we also see a lot of use cases in financial services and logistics around the concept of workflow automation. Then we see quite a bit on the topic of R&D and things that are pushing a little bit the frontier, building large language models that understand your culture, understand a specific language, to make sure that once it's time to launch it to citizens or to employees, it's very useful. So examples of that could be, we built a Southeast Asian language for the Department of Home Affairs in Singapore. And then finally, we see quite a bit of use cases that are directly correlated to employee and developer productivity, particularly in countries for which sovereignty and independence in AI is important. Being able to deploy those systems on-premise to keep the data home is also a series of use cases we see quite often. So for us, really, the key to adoption is the ability to adapt and adopt really the models and customize the models to your context, to the enterprise context, to make it useful and that bridge the gap very nicely between a failed proof of concepts and actually systems that are going to production.
Great, thank you. Farlei, you work across hundreds of large enterprise clients globally. What patterns are emerging among companies that are successfully operationalizing AI, especially in legacy-heavy environments?
Well, what we see ultimately, all the companies that are focusing on training people, by nature, people are scared about innovation and changes. So we see companies adopting a lot of trainings, not just led by IT, but coming even from HR programs. This is one aspect that is helping companies to move on. The second aspect that is really relevant, they are building in parallel of the actual daily activities that the people are running on all the companies. They have divisions and teams. They build their teams internally most of the time together with some partners, because it's impossible to learn everything that is happening. The speed of change and improvements is so fast right now. They have partners helping them, and they build in parallel organizations to support the teams daily. So the people, instead of doing all their activities or trying to figure out how to use any AI tools, they have a full organization helping them in parallel to make sure that they don't get disturbed or they don't stop doing their own activities. This is the second aspect. The third one is the most challenging one. All this AI transformation, the most tricky part is everything related to change management. That's not easy. People, like I said before, they are always trying to avoid changes, and that is the most concerning part in all the companies. The companies that are managing better these changes, they are evolving faster than the others.
Thank you. Aaron, from your vantage point in accounting and finance, how is AI changing day-to-day productivity for small and medium-sized businesses? And are we past the experimentation stage?
Yeah, great question, and one that I love to talk about. We've actually been building AI for several years now, and we see that we've been going through phases or waves of AI adoption. The first of those waves being what we call task-based AI. So if you take a step back and look at, who do we sell to? We sell to a CFO, we sell to finance leaders, and they have a lot of work that I call sort of non-negotiable, but nevertheless low value. They have to process invoices, they have to pay vendors, they've got to get the payroll done, and they can't choose to forego a potential acquisition or new product launch, or they can't choose to not close the books because they'd rather spend time doing something like that. And so the real promise of AI and where we're seeing real measurable impact is AI that tackles this non-negotiable repetitive work. So AI that can process an invoice, that can classify transactions, reconcile bank accounts, look for anomalies in a large pool of data. I was joking with Marjorie early today that accounting software is actually not super exciting to a lot of people, but it's very sexy to a data scientist and AI engineer, because there is so much highly structured data that customers actually label for you. And so we've made huge progress in accounting. And I guess what I would finish with here is CFOs, unfortunately, are often measured by how productive their teams are. And one of the big measures is how quickly they can get the books closed every month. And so when we started building AI 4, 5, 6 years ago, they were taking 2 to 3 weeks to get the books closed, right? So they only had a week of freedom before they had to start the process over again. If you talk to companies now that are really adopting AI to tackle that non-negotiable work, they're getting their books closed in 2 or 3 days, and they're able to spend their time on that more strategic work.
Great, thank you. Ansel, what is AiiA, and why focus on decision quality and time to action?
And actually, I want to build off of what Aaron said, which is about sort of closing your books quickly. And I think what AiiA enables companies to do, what it's designed to do, is bring the methodologies from the intelligence community, typically reserved for heads of state or sort of diplomats, and to understand the world and make decisions off of it, and to automate as many of those as possible to sort of supercharge human capacity. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at, is if you can get a team to do their required work in 2 or 3 days versus a month, the rest of that time is available for the thing that requires the really deep human thought. And so I think what we're trying to do with AiiA is take sort of the grunt work of research and other things and prepare intelligence versus just information to the leader, inform the leader. And we envision this sort of scene around a table where everybody comes prepared to discuss not what happened, but what the company should do about it. How do we take steps to seize the opportunity that this global event is presenting to us? Or how do we mitigate the risk? And it's not just risk management. That is one thing I will say is different from my career in the intelligence community. I sometimes joke that the teams I led, successfully predicted 13 of 3 actual crises. Business can't take that approach, right? You have to sort of try and find the opportunity there and can't just focus on the bad. So, supercharging our humans who are in there to make good decisions with rigor and intelligence and seize the opportunity.
One of the topics top of mind for AI is growth and scaling. Once an organization has a proof of concept, scaling is oftentimes the hardest step. What are the biggest bottlenecks you see in data integration, governance, or organization culture? Aaron, let's start with you. Sage serves millions of business users. How are you embedding responsible AI principles, transparency, explainability into tools that non-technical professionals can use daily?
Yeah, so there's a couple dimensions to this, and I think what I would start with is what research has shown us is the biggest barrier to adopting AI is trust, and there's a lot of facets to that. But what we then learned was that the biggest signal to a potential buyer of AI of trust is the brand behind the AI. And so the first step in really building AI that customers choose and are willing to use is actually being a respectable company that has values and principles and are not shy about publishing those. And so if you go to our website, you'll find several videos of me talking about the values that guide us in the way that we build AI. And it all ends with hopefully a memorable quote from me. It's essentially that we will never use AI in a way that erodes your trust in Sage or our products. Right, both the brand and the products behind the brand. So I'll tell you one more story there that gets to the heart of the matter, though. So we have to have the brand that's reliable and trusted, but then the product's got to work in a way that really reinforces trust. So when we first built Sage Copilot, which is our conversational AI assistant, I was playing around with an early version of it. It was a version that we deploy into our small business product, and I asked it a very simple question. I said, "What is my cash balance?" And it very curtly answered, "Your cash balance is 0. And that was it. And I knew the answer was wrong. So I went back to the engineers and the designer and I said, "Hey, what's going on here?" And they explained to me, well, actually, the answer was correct because your petty cash balance, in other words, the cash you have on hand, is 0. So we had this conversation about trying to understand and infer meaning from questions. And so when they did the work to sort of fix the experience for me, I asked again, it said again, "Your cash balance is 0, but you may have been asking what is the accumulated balance across all of your bank accounts. In that case, here's a table that shows your accounts and their balances, and you can click on the links to get more detail." And today, in that same conversational interface, we go one step further. So we allow you to open up an analysis tab and a background tab where we show you the reasoning that our agents took to answer the question. We actually show you the API endpoints, the agentic endpoints that it took. And so we sort of err a little bit, maybe too much on transparency, but that's kind of the point. Last thing really quickly, we did also just launch a trust label. So within our products, if you're making a decision about whether you want to use a capability powered by AI, there's a label that'll tell you how we built it, how we secure the data, how we're training the models, whether they're our models or somebody else's models. So you can make that decision with full transparency about it.
Maybe to piggyback on that, I think on the topic of trust, I think that's why the concept of open source models is also very essential. I mean, in the end, if all our businesses are running on closed source models, we don't even really know what's going behind it. Mistral decided to go the open source route to give really the power and the control back to the enterprise to understand a little bit more what's going on and being controlling a little bit the guardrailing behind those models. So I love what you said. Yeah.
Well, Aaron, as a fan of Sage, I'm glad to hear your cash balance isn't 0. Ansel, delivering AI-driven insights to boards and C-suites, how do you build trust and explainability?
So I'll piggyback a little bit and say, yes, a lot of it is transparency about argumentation. Very early on in our program, we decided to sort of hinge on what are called ICD 203 and 206, which are the standards from the US government for sourcing, transparency, and analytic tradecraft. And I think, I often say to our team, we are beginning and end basically in the trust business. And if you violate that trust, it takes a long time to build it back up. The other thing we do is we try and not, or we prompt to not be policy prescriptive. So we're not saying, buy gold now. We are saying businesses that do X probably will be insulated from Y risk, and lay out very clearly the why with, as I say, with rigor and with tradecraft.
Thank you, Ansel. Farlei, as a global IT integrator, how are you helping your clients modernize data infrastructure and governance frameworks so that AI projects won't stall in the pilot stage?
Well, that's a very, very catching question. Most of the companies nowadays and governments, etc., they have the data. They have a lot of data. Most of them are, in most of the cases, crappy data. You need to really clean it up. We need to bring them together. They have a lot of different databases for different products, and from providing the data that you need to really work on that. But that's the beauty I see nowadays with the AI. For having and to make sure that you can really use the data, you need to have a very clean and accurate data. This is one aspect. How you can get there, you can use already AI to really organize the data, to bring them together. We know that the dream is to have all the data in one place. That's not going to happen immediately. We are going to have different systems, so we need to integrate the data. And AI is a very powerful tool to help you to organize all this data. On top of that, once you have the data organized, you can use even all the other tools that are exploring the AI capabilities to really take the best information that you need from there. So infrastructure is at the beginning. You see on the news, all the data centers they are working on right now, that is going to be just to provide the right environment for all the data that is coming. More and more the companies are understanding that the data must be good for using AI tools. So we are going to reshape the data since the beginning on the right way. So the way that we are providing and supporting the companies most of the time, we believe always that is the extensive use of AI, but we need to go one step before to make sure that you have the data that is accurate to explore that tools as well.
Thank you. Marjorie, Mistral has emphasized both ethical AI and open innovation. How do you balance openness with a need for commercial grade reliability and compliance?
Yeah, so of course, like we said a little bit earlier, I think open source is just a great way to create that transparency, but also that flexibility to adapt those models to your context, whether it's a cultural context, a language context, or a domain context. I think that's the first step. But I think what we've also learned over the past couple of years, because Mistral started 2 years after some of the big players, we've learned what doesn't necessarily work in some real life use cases that we've seen enterprise face. What's needed now is beyond just the models. The models have mostly all been trained on the internet. It means that they all understand more or less the same thing. What matters now is injecting your IP, your data. Of course, that data stays home, but making those systems your own. Which, by the way, on the topic of data, a lot of your businesses in Canada have strong IP around data. You have an opportunity to create really gigantic moats around that data and competitive advantages leveraging AI. What's needed now is a little bit the stack that goes on top of the models, the products that are going to be able to turn really those brains into workflows that are being automated. And this is a complete technology stack. So I think to go back to your question, openness and open source is great for adoption, for trust, and for de-risking AI. But what's needed after that is really the technology technology stack that's really adapted to the enterprise context. And then I do think deploying solutions in AI is very different to what we have all done over the past 20 years. The concept of applied science and applied engineering that connects the dots between the technology and then the use cases you all have on the day-to-day basis is quite essential. And what we're trying to do in Canada and more broadly is connecting those dots between the technology, the models, but also the applied work that needs to take place for AI to be successful in a business.
Great. As Marjorie talked a little bit about what's next, we're now seeing the rise of AI agents, autonomous workflows, natural language interfaces that changes how work gets done. What do you see as the most transformative and most misunderstood aspect of this next phase for AI? And how can leaders ensure that automation agents automation augments rather than displaces the human capacity? Ansel, let's start with you. How will AI agents change the way executives make enterprise-wide decisions?
So our approach is to use the agents in sort of a sequential fashion to build rigor into a decision process. And that starts by sort of breaking decision out into component parts and applying the right sort of like that term of applied, sort of the applied element of it. What are we asking here? How does that answer get to the next one? And then leveraging the technology to do that at speed and equip decision makers with sort of fulsome information. Farlei, I love when you were talking about data, and I think one of the realities of the era we live in is sort of the tyranny of data, and that when you go and talk to executives, when we think about how we're informed, people often make, forgive me for doing this with one hand, but I get it on my phone motion, right? You're scrolling through articles or whatever the algorithm happens to present to you. And I think we have to be really deliberate about that and not inundate ourselves so our capacity is what we heard most recently. And our approach, we partner with Palantir to do this in our case, but it is again to build this sort of rigorous decision-making and structured analytic technique informed process into a decision and leveraging the agents to do that in a smart way. And we're not wedded to one. I mean, one of the things we've seen over time is actually as the models evolve, they become good or bad at certain points in that decision train, and you have to be flexible at it. So like a call to ChatGPT 5.0 might not be as effective as a call out to Grok for this particular component part of it.
Or Mistral.
Or Mistral, yes, exactly. Well, the assumption is yours is always better. So just be clear for the room. Yeah, and so that flexibility and I think with AI we often talk about how fast it's evolving, but I think there's a little bit of a risk that we leverage that to a certain point and then we get stalled. As we've built this solution here. This is what it is, and we're only going to lean on it. So we have to also then lean into that sort of flexibility. And I actually think AI agents are one of the ways to do that because they are so interactive and close to intelligent.
Great. Marjorie, maybe a debated topic, but from a model developer's standpoint, what is the next frontier? Is it small domain-specific models, multimodal systems, or the integration of AI agents into everyday workflows?
Yeah, I think I actually think this is not the right question, somehow, because I think we've departed the world of model war or model choice in the sense that the model at the end is the foundation for what needs to happen next, which is injecting the enterprise context and then customizing to the use case. To me, the workflow, if we can speak about the workflow, is starting with what business problem are we actually trying to solve with AI, not thinking about how a process needs to be optimized, but how a process needs to be reimagined in the world of AI, exposed to end users that are doing the work every day to make sure it's going to be useful, and then think about what is the right model infrastructure underneath. And yes, it could mean that if you're deploying on the edge, you may need a Mistral, which is a very tiny model that fits on device. If you need something that's highly capable in reasoning, you may pick a larger model. But there's now a variety of choices that could be task-specific, domain-specific, and all of that, in the end, what matters is connecting it to the use case and the business problem it's trying to solve. So you do need a diversity of models, for sure, to accomplish certain tasks, but to me, it's starting with the task and then plugging the technology behind it. And that's a game changer to driving adoption. We don't care about model benchmarks anymore. We don't care to know if we're number one in research benchmarks. We care to know how our models going to address a specific business problem, which is tackling the question a little bit differently.
Interesting. Aaron, how do you see AI transforming financial professionals' role from data entry to insight generation over the next 3 years?
So I'm going to answer that question, but I kind of want to answer the one you gave Marjorie.
Go ahead.
Go for it. I
think the answer is all of the above. And you guys can pay me later for the free advertising here. But to build on some of what she said, we actually use a few of Mistral's models as the foundation for models that we then develop and we specialize for our domain. And one of the big advantages of the models that we're using from your organization is that they're small, right? So we're working with a 7 billion parameter model from your team, which, to give you a sense of scope here, today's modern frontier models are trillions of parameters. And so there's a direct correlation from in the size of the model to the efficiency, right? Energy consumption, performance, reliability, and predictability. And so now how all these things tie together into my all of the above answer is that if you really want to create a great agentic experience, you have to have that kind of predictable performance and efficiency in the brains and in the skills that you're making available for the agents. So leading to the question that you actually asked me, where we are in the journey for the accounting profession is, as I said earlier, it's mainstream now, the use of AI to tackle all of these repetitive chores that have to be done, that you can't get out of. The next step in the evolution is actually now empowering that profession to tackle the kinds of work that I think they got into the profession in the first place to do, right? Being the advisors in business. If there is an opportunity to launch a new product or to acquire a new subsidiary, being an expert, a source of advice and guidance in that transaction. And AI plays a big role here as well, right? So yes, there's sort of the human empathy and massive context that a human can bring to that decision-making process, but they can't possibly evaluate all the sources of information that drive you to the right answer in the way that AI can. So that's where we're at today, right? We've sort of moved on now from automating tasks, and we're now empowering humans to do more valuable work.
Thank you. Farlei, your group works at the intersection of consulting and IT services. How are you preparing the global workforce to collaborate with AI rather than compete against it?
Yeah, for me, that's a very interesting question. The nature of our company, we are providing services. So we are not a product company. We provide services using tools, even some of them. Bringing AI to the table somehow is going to amplify the power of our people. It's one example. So how in the beginning, when ChatGPT came and we were talking about coding using Copilot and some other technologies that are available in the market, the developers, they were scared, for sure. So how we turn it around? First, you give training. I answered that in the first question as well. Training, and just to make sure that they understand the tools so they start using and playing with that. We build a full environment, giving access to the 35,000 employees that we have. We build a platform that they have access to all the LLMs. We give training for all of them. We build a team to support them in their ideas. Is the second step. Third step, we open a division to get ideas from the employees. So instead of bringing them the challenge that you are going to be replaced, bringing us an idea that you are going to get a recognition from the company. So we start having cases that we all go in public in our internal communication channels. This idea, this product, this solution, this customer is an idea coming from one of the people or a team that we have. So that was bringing the feeling about achievement instead of having a feeling about I'm going to be replaced. I think that is going to work for all the companies. If you think about that, that you start emphasize that for the next 2 or 3 years, I strongly believe, you were talking about that before, AI is going to amplify a lot of our power. So we are going to cover some gaps that you were missing people before, we were missing speed, you were missing some quality in some situations. AI can cover that aspect. It might be a case in 3-4 years that we don't know yet, because we are not there yet, that we are going to have new positions and even new ways to have new products. So somehow it's working. The company, we have divisions that we know that in 2 years are not going to exist anymore because we are going to replace positions, but all these people, they are already doing something that we were not able to do that before. So I strongly believe that AI is just going to bring more value than we saw before. It's a very beautiful, disruptive moment. I'm a 30 years IT guy, and I see just the beauty behind.
Great. As we start to think about closing and reflections, I want to ask the same question to all the panelists. And Marjorie, I'll start with you. As business leaders navigate AI adoption, how can they foster trust across all applications to ensure it helps achieve the results that they're aiming for?
Yeah, I think it touched a little bit on what my colleague here mentioned a couple of minutes ago. To me, first, it's kind of changing the role of IT a little bit in the organization. I think IT definitely needs to be an enabler, but I think line of businesses now needs to get really engaged in defining what those solutions needs to be. Because that technology is transformative, you need to understand the task in order to really be transformative. So I think that's in all the CEOs in the room, I think that's quite a change, right? IT used to really own the end-to-end process. Now IT is an enabler powered by the line of business. And I do think it goes back to bringing the end users in the pilots. Because those end users, when they're going to realize actually that out of 18 tasks that used to be very boring, now 90% of them are automated, so they can actually go and do most often than not, more interesting things, like Aaron was talking about on the accounting side. Suddenly they become your internal champions. And I think so far it's been working great in logistics, in financial services, in the public sector. So yeah, that's how I would comment on the place of the end user, the place of IT, and then putting the line of business really at the heart of that business transformation. You need all of those parties to be successful.
Ansel, fostering trust?
Yeah, I mean, I think actually all 4 of us have said we're talking about not automating the past, we're talking about anticipating the future and getting buy-in from the organization and speaking clearly about how the tools and the systems we're building will advance the whole of the enterprise. You know, and I saw something just sort of recently, you know, that belonging is the greatest indicator of performance on a team. And I think as we adopt this sort of disruptive technology, we have to put that at the core, that this is a way to sort of engage people across the enterprise in greater productivity and greater success, shared success.
Aaron?
Yeah, I mean, this is probably unsurprisingly, it's been a big topic in the leadership team at Sage. You know, essentially, how do we really push the organization to embrace AI to its greatest potential? And what we decided was that we needed to set out a couple of principles, you know, quite publicly with our employees. And one of those principles was essentially our expectation with AI is to drive greater growth and success, as opposed to some of the headlines that probably cause employees a lot of anxiety, where they're seeing big companies using AI to sort of allow them to do big layoffs, right? It's a very different mindset to say, this is going to enable productivity that drives greater success and greater growth. And I think setting out that objective early on with employees sets the right tone. And then, the second thing that we wrestle with is, okay, on the spectrum of, fully governed, central control, nothing happens unless it comes out of the center, to, wild, wild west, do whatever you want, we're going to trust you to be, innovative. We had to make a decision about where, we were going to stand on that spectrum. And I think there's an important signal to employees about trusting them. And so, we're a very sort of staid British technology company, and it was probably a little bit uncomfortable for us, but we did want to signal to our employees that we trust them, right? And so, yes, we're going to have some central governance. Yes, we've got a global purchasing team and a security team that needs to get involved when there's new technology. But fundamentally, the expectation to our leaders is that when they look at their top initiatives this year, we're going to see AI initiatives amongst that, and we're going to have high expectations based on our trust in those leaders that great outcomes are going to emerge.
Thank you, Farlei. Fostering trust.
Well, even the companies, if I'm thinking about how I see the change in the organizations, even our business cases, when we were thinking about how or why I should invest something to develop something new, even the business case sometimes was hard, because you needed to build one full tool. We need to invest a lot of energy, time, people to have some implementation, and just after, you should see the return of investment. With the AI tools, we see, I love her idea. It is more about what's the problem, because I don't see how we cannot get it there with the AI tools that are coming. So more than ever, if you focus on the problems that we have, the tools are going to be available. You see the evolution of the tools are so fast. We were talking about the cycles in the past. It was like 5-year cycles, and then we have a new technology coming. Now it's like each 6 months, you have products coming, popping up for bringing solutions that we were not able even to think about that before. So I think that all of us, our companies, the governments, they are going to focus more on what is the task, what is the problem, the tools are going to be available, and that's, I think, that is the way to show to organizations and people that they just need to use the tools that are available, and we should focus more on the problems instead of the technologies. That's my last takeaway.
Thank you. On behalf of Garda, I want to thank IEFA for the opportunity for us to be here. And I hope the audience takes with me a moment to thank all of our panelists for sharing so openly on a topic that's shaping so much of what we do today. So thank you.